Welcome to Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine's Fiction Podcast. I'm EQMM's editor, Janet Hutchings. This month we present a story by our magazine's founders, the two men who wrote as Ellery Queen, Frederic Dannay and Manfred B. Lee. It's a classic puzzle mystery that contains the hallmark Ellery Queen challenge to the reader. That's a pause in the story before the solution is given, in which readers, in this case listeners, are challenged to come up with the solution to the puzzle before Ellery reveals it. Good luck to everyone in figuring it out. Here is EQMM's managing editor, Jackie Sherbow, reading The Broken Tea by Ellery Queen, most recently reprinted in the November-December 2021 issue of EQMM.
Saturday, 11:55 p.m. Angie, not happily, turned into her street. It was one of those dead-end streets on the far side of Midtown Manhattan, made up of equal parts warehouses, garages, renovated pre-1901 apartment buildings, and darkness. Lots of darkness. Tonight, the street wore a more sinister look than usual, which Angie blamed on the second feature she had just seen. The film, in explicit Spectracolor, had been a continuous horror of bile-green creatures pursuing a heroine of stainless steel nerve. How could any girl be so brave, Angie thought, cringing as she hurried into her unlit vestibule, and screamed. The scream came out a mumbly squawk, because a large, spongy hand smelling of aftershave lotion and gun oil had leaped out of the dark and attached itself to her mouth. Two other hands, and that makes a pair of the beasts, the bookkeeping division of Angie's brain recorded automatically, yanked her arms up behind her back and pushed. "Whoa, bossy," gargled the pusher, still pushing. His breath sprayed sheer garlic. Angie said through the pain, offering to surrender the $9.63 in her purse. But it seemed that was not it at all, for Garlic Breath breathed, "You sure she's the Lawton broad?" And a light exploded in her eyes, and Lilac and Gun Oil's voice replied, "Sure, I'm sure. I studied her pictures in the papers." Whereupon Garlic Breath said with chilling relish, "Then away we go." And the light went out, leaving Angie in Spectracolor blindness, with the horrid knowledge that this was no routine mugging after all. The gears in her comptometer kept whirring as the pair dragged her out to a purring car, shoved her in head first, blindfolded her with something that smelled like a shoeshine rag, threw her on the car floor face down, and then one of them seated himself above her and dug his shoes into strategic sections of her anatomy as the other got behind the wheel and drove them away. Angie knew now what it was all about. It had to have something to do with the city licensing authority bribery scandal and the trial of the indicted commissioner scheduled to begin on Monday morning. She prayed briefly for the inhuman movie heroine's courage, which, being merely human, Angie knew she possessed in merely human quantity. But at the same time, for if such is the kingdom of bookkeepers, she found herself counting. Sunday, 9:10 a.m. "How much of a beating did they give the girl?" Ellery asked Inspector Queen as they waited outside the hospital room for the district attorney to come out. "Not enough to show, and more than plenty to make their point," scowled his father. "A real pro-workover, Ellery. Now she's too scared to testify. Maybe you can do something." According to the inspector's briefing, CLA clerk, typist, bookkeeper Angela Lawton, 23, blonde, and pretty, upon whose testimony the city of New York was mainly relying for the conviction of the corrupt commissioner, had been seized the night before by two men, driven blindfolded to an apartment somewhere, scientifically beaten, threatened with the destruction of her prettiness by acid if she testified on Monday, and dumped unconscious on her doorstep in the early hours of Sunday morning, where she was found by a parole car. The job had clearly been the work of musclemen in the defender's behalf, but the girl had not once glimpsed the thugs' faces, and the chances of connecting the assault with the man on trial seemed approximately 0. "So there goes the DA's case," said Inspector Queen, "unless we can get her to change her mind. Any luck, Herman?" he asked as the district attorney came out of the hospital room. The DA shook his head wanly and plodded away. "Well, let's try ours," said Ellery, and they went in. The Girl was lying on the hospital bed like a stick. Now understand, Miss Lawton, nobody's blaming you one bit, Ellery said, tenderly, taking her hand. A beating from professionals is a hard argument to top, but suppose we catch those men, make them talk, put them away. Then you'll have nothing to be afraid of, and you can testify, right? The cold little hand tried to withdraw. Tenderly, Ellery held on to it. It's a big suppose, Mr. Queen. How are you going to catch them? I have no idea where they took me, except that I know you heard all over, crooned Ellery as Angie stopped to wince. Except from what? That wherever it is, it's across the street from a window with a neon sign in it. The blindfold slipped once while they were slamming me around, and before they could tighten it again, I saw the sign flashing on and off in the dark. One neon sign in the whole of New York. Pretty big odds, Inspector Queen said, showing his dentures and what he intended as a smile. By the way, what did the sign say, Miss Lawton? Oh, and what color was it? Pinkish red, and the sign said Eat, in capital letters. How many of those do you suppose there are? Hundreds, thousands, Ellery said. Though neon signs do often become defective, Angie. You don't mind if I call you Angie. Did you happen to notice any imperfections in the letters? There was a break in one of them, said Angie with a faint show of interest. The T had an unlit gap, sort of, in the middle of the upright. E-A broken T, Ellery beamed. Across the street, you say? Oh, how about the drive over there? Did they drive fast? Angela's lip curled. Think they'd take a chance on being stopped for a traffic violation? I paid particular attention to that. They didn't once exceed the speed limit. You can tell from the way it feels. At least, I can. I'll bet you can, said Ellery sincerely. Though it's too bad you can't also tell us how long the drive took. Oh, can't I? Snapped Angie. I know exactly. The moment the car started off, I began to count in my head. At 1-second intervals. I'm good at that. I practice with clocks for kicks. And of course, I held up the count while it stopped for lights. Of course, Ellery said. His father was speechless. Did you, stop to pay any tolls? No, I didn't hear a single click. Ellery cleared his throat. So you counted seconds. How many, Angie? My count was 417 seconds for the trip, allowing for error, say, 7 minutes riding time. Ellery brought Angie's hand, which was quite warm by this time, to his lips reverently. God bless your little bookkeeping head. There wouldn't be anything else, Angie, would there? Angie frowned. Well, yes. They had my arms tied to the sides of a chair, but I managed to scratch an X on each side with my nails. But what good is that, unless you find the room? In the corridor, Ellery chortled. What a girl. This ought to be peach pie, Dad. Maximum average speed, say, 30 miles an hour. Half a mile a minute. Time in motion, 7 minutes. Maximum distance, therefore, 3 1/2 miles. In any direction, his father pointed out dryly, including circling back, which means your 3 1/2 miles could wind up in the next block. I'm talking maximums, Dad. So that apartment has to be within 3 1/2 miles of Angie's door. Figure 20 city blocks to the mile, and that's a radius of 70 blocks. In other words, anywhere between the East River and the Hudson east and west, and between, say, Houston Street and the Harlem River south and north. The inspector sounded unimpressed. And if your little lady's built-in computer happened to be off, it could be anywhere on Manhattan Island. That's a clue, that is. At least we know it's in Manhattan, Dad. No tolls, Angie said. We also know the apartment faces a diner or a cafeteria, and for that pink neon Eat sign to be visible through the apartment window, the apartment is almost certainly on the ground floor. Once we found such an apartment, it can be positively identified by those X's Angie scratched on the chair. And that's it. You make it sound so simple, snorted the old man. All right, Ellery. I'll put every available man on the streets to locate that diner or cafeteria. But you know what I think? I think this is a pipe dream. Sunday, 6:15 p.m. The inspector proved prophet. As the last reports straggled in at headquarters, he said kindly, Not a single diner or cafeteria in Manhattan with a broken T Eat sign? "So what now, son?" "Time," muttered Ellery, wearing a path in the inspector's floor. "Time. The trial starts in less than 16 hours. A neon sign with a broken letter." His father said, "What's the matter?" "What's the matter?" screamed Ellery. "I'm an idiot is what's the matter. Not fit to carry that girl's pen wiper. Dad, here's what you've got to do." Monday, 5:02 a.m. So, the inspector did it, and here the Queen stood, on a nondescript Manhattan street in a lightning hour, gazing on a plate-glass window behind which a pinkish-red neon sign flashed, on and off its 24-hours-a-day message, "Eat," with its broken T on the ascender, exactly as Angela Lawton had described it. And following the possible line of sight across the street, Inspector Queen's men did indeed locate a ground-floor apartment with a view of the "Eat" sign, and sleeping therein, they found a man with hands that smelled of lilac lotion and gun oil, and they showed him the chair with the 2 scratched-in X's, and the shoe rag with which Angie Lawton had been blindfolded. And this bird was invited to raise his voice in song, which, after some encouragement, he did, and at 5:37 a.m. they had also fleshed the other bird, Garlic Breath, who was unmistakable. They drove down to the hospital for a glad, happy, joyous session with Angie, thence to the district attorney's office, where the 2 birds sang a duet, and it all turned out fine, except for the corrupt public servant. Challenge to the reader. What had Ellery told Inspector Queen to do? Ellery told Inspector Queen to have his men stop looking for a diner or cafeteria and instead, but let Ellery tell it himself. Every eating place within the limits of the prescribed area had been covered without turning up a neon sign such as Angie described. Was it possible the sign didn't mean what it seemed to say, that the word was not eat but something else? According to Angie, the sign had a defective T. Suppose that was not the only defect in the sign. For instance, you're always running across neon signs with entire letters blacked out. Since it had been nighttime, Angie would only see the letters that were lit up. Suppose "eat" had a letter missing. The likeliest place for a missing letter in "eat" is at the beginning of the word. Run through the alphabet, and you'll find that only one letter, under the circumstances, makes sense: M. So I suggested looking for a defective "meat" sign in the window of a butcher shop, which is where they found it.
The Broken T and all of the Ellery Queen characters are copyrighted by the Frederic, Dannay, and Manfred B. Lee Literary Property Trusts. Music for the podcast was obtained from purpleplanet.com. Mixing and editing were done by Kevin Wheeler and Jackie Sherbow. You can subscribe to Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, where you'll find more stories like this one by visiting our website at www.elleryqueenmysterymagazine.com.